Guru Nation, welcome to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I'm Dan Sphere. I'm joined by Ronak Ganatra. He is an entrepreneur. He has a very interesting backstory, and then we're going to kind of follow his backstory into how he got into clinical research. Your origin story, Ronak, and you have a very ambitious goals. You have a very ambitious vision for what you want to accomplish in this industry. And we were joking a little bit off camera earlier about your goals, but that's how paradigms get changed. You know, it takes people like you to do it. So thank you very much for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I really am thankful that you came on today on short notice, but I thought your story was really good. And we're going to get into the mystery shopping that you did as a trial patient. But in order for that to make sense, let's talk about your background first, okay?
Sure. So I come from a digital marketing and hospitality background. I'm an entrepreneur, so I started in consulting. I was helping companies with their online marketing and digital marketing. And then I switched into the hospitality industry, working for hotels.
Okay.
And so that's where I picked up a lot of the customer experience, and it kind of brought together two different worlds of marketing and the actual day-to-day experience of interaction with guests. And then finally, my latest venture, I did some work in e-commerce. I started a company in the office product space, and so the latest, I actually stumbled upon one of your videos, actually, and I've always been interested in getting into the healthcare space, and I watched your videos about clinical trials, and that kind of led me to start digging deeper into what the industry was, and it's fascinating. And so, similar to when I was with the hospitality group, I was a part of that group that actually took several hotels and put them under one umbrella. So they combined operations and a lot of the back office functions, and I was a part of that. And so my idea was to take that concept and bring it into the clinical trial space, because there are a few big players in this space, but really over 90% are single mom and pop type operations where it's maybe one doctor and a few researchers, and really to bring some more professionalization into the industry, and to help solve some of the issues around patient recruitment and long study startups. And so, long story short, I'm starting a venture that will be acquiring several sites throughout the country, and then helping to implement some of the marketing and patient-centric insights, if you will. Build one of the leading networks in the country.
So, and that's a very interesting model that you're trying to emulate. I love when our industry borrows from other industries, because we're such slow adopters in clinical research. I mean, I remember when EDC came out in 2005, and email. I remember when I first got started in research in '05, it was still uncommon for monitors to email coordinators. Like, they would send letters, and everywhere else in the world and most other industries, email was already a thing for 10 years, right? So it's just so strange how this industry, I mean, think about how important this industry is, right? Like, it's medicine.
Absolutely.
It's life. It's life in a nutshell.
Sure.
So,
Yes.
we need, and there are people in the industry, there are thought leaders. If you go to conferences, there's talk about these things, about innovations and medical disruptions, right, in a good way. But I think the best way to do that is to look at what's already been done from other industries. And so I've never actually heard of hospitality and how that can apply to clinical research, but what you just explained in 3 minutes makes all the sense in the world to me. And we've had numerous conversations, you and I.
Sure.
Just right now that it clicked. Okay, this is why You got it. I mean, and then you seem like a naturally curious person, so you must have just been stumbling upon different business opportunities, and you came across research somehow, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So borrowing from hospitality, what do you think about patient centricity? Because in hospitality, customer service is everything. Okay, and in clinical research, it's supposed to be the same thing. Like everybody says, patients come first. And
Hmm.
now sponsors are designing protocols, sometimes with patients, helping them design it. But it still feels like it's more of a lip service than it is actually something that they're actually doing. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like, yeah, we say we put patients first, but I think the only ones who truly do that are the sites, and then the sponsors who are our real customers as sites. It's still B2B. It's not B2C. So what do you feel when you hear the word patient centricity, but then you see all the inefficiencies? And now we're going to get into your experience as a trial participant because you did some mystery shopping. So what do you feel about this buzzword? Because I, for one, hate it.
Sure. I think, there are, every industry has their buzzwords. So I think over time it just, things get overused and they fail to have meaning over time. And it's kind of lip service, as you said. And my personal experience with a couple of mystery shops that I did was that, it's definitely not patient centric.
So explain what you did. So you brought, again, bringing another standard practice from hospitality, mystery shopping. You probably went to competitors' hotels all the time, right? Or you had people doing it. So now you're saying, hey, why don't I do this now for research? So explain what you did.
Yeah, so essentially, really what I was doing is I wanted to learn what the process was like from a patient point of view. So I think I just the the process I did was I looked up certain trials, and I was looking for trials in my area. And so the first thing I did was what I learned from you is clinicaltrials.gov.
Okay.
And so I did, I selected my city and I selected a couple of things that I felt that I could participate in, and it came up with a list of a few trials, but I didn't. The problem with that process was one, I didn't know what to do with it. So okay, I have this information. Here's a trial. Here's all this mumbo jumbo about exclusion criteria and this and that. But what do I do with it? Like how do I? Okay, I'm sold. I want to participate. How do I participate? And so I saw some phone numbers, but they were not. So I think I saw a phone number of a site. So I Googled that site and I was able to find it, and then I called them. But so the first problem was a typical patient doesn't know what to do with this clinicaltrials.gov information. Number two, not all the trials are actually listed on there, or if they are, not all the information is listed. So I'll give you an example. I was looking, after I did the clinicaltrials.gov, I went to Google and I just did clinical trials for my city. And then a couple of clinics came up, and so I started clicking through those, and I was able to find studies that were not listed on clinicaltrials.gov. And when I dug into it, the reason for that is when you go to the contact information, sometimes they have all the sites that are listed, but sometimes they just have one contact. So maybe that's like the CRO who's in charge of site administration or whatever it is. And you're supposed to call them, and then they're supposed to give you another number for the site in your local area. But if somebody's doing a search, and I don't know how many patients actually do this, do it this way. Maybe it's not that many. Most of them are probably going through their doctor or coming in through an ad or something like that. But it's one lead source that that's probably not fully exploited because all the information is just not on there. So going back to what I did is I called a total of five sites. Four of those sites I was calling after 5 p.m. And
did you do that on purpose or just because it was convenient for you?
I was, I'd finished my work for the day, and I thought, okay, let me get into this. And in many ways, it's actually a parallel and a proxy for what a real patient would do, right? They're not calling while they're at work. They have their schedules, they have their lives, and maybe after they get off from work, they think, oh, okay, let me call the clinic for the trial.
Gotcha.
So it just happened that way. And so the first clinic I called, I got a auto attendant, which was not a surprise. What was surprising to me was that there was no option to leave a message. It was just, first of all, you get that annoying message that if this is an emergency, call 911.
Yeah.
And then they went through the whole process, and then like, okay, you've called after hours, call back. When we're open.
Wow.
And then click. So that was.
There's a missed opportunity. Research sites have an answering machine. You don't need a fancy outsourced call center, which is not that expensive. Have a freaking voicemail set up. I mean, you can do it on your cell phone. Absolutely.
So the second one, that was the first one. The second one I called, they had a hard-to-hear auto attendant. It was kind of, the audio was distorted. It seemed like it was kind of, maybe it was recorded on a speakerphone or something, but I couldn't fully understand it. But then they had the option for a voicemail. So I left a voicemail, and that was that. And I went on to the third one. The third one, so let me go back to the second one. The second one, they never called me back. So that was the end of that.
How many days? The next day, or when? Like, how long did you give them to call you back?
It's been several weeks, and they have.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to be calling me anytime soon. The third one, I called. I left a voicemail, and this was a bigger company, and it was not a drug trial. It was a non-drug trial. And with a major company, in-house research company, and I called them and left a voicemail, and they called me back. I was not available on the phone, so they left a voicemail for me, and then I actually forgot about it, and so they did call back to their credit, but then they did not follow up. So I haven't heard. They attempted once, and I haven't heard any follow-up. Normally, in sales and marketing, we would want to follow up. Especially if you have somebody calling in and an inbound lead, and they're going through the motions of calling you, contacting you, finding you, which is difficult in and of itself. And then they're leaving a contact number, but you only call them back once. That's also a missed opportunity. So that was that. Then. The fourth one, actually, somebody picked up, and it was a recruiter, and they screened me on the spot, and had me set up for an appointment the next morning. So I thought that was very impressive. I was impressed that they were able to go through the process, answer my questions, and I had all the typical questions that a first time patient does because I was in the shoes of a patient. So I asked them all kinds of questions about what is involved, how long it will take, what's the compensation that's offered. And I don't know if I should mention this. I'm not mentioning the name of the site, but I think certain things they probably took liberty for saying that they probably shouldn't have said. So, for example, I asked, "Is it safe?" And the recruiter said, "It's pretty safe," or something to that effect. Or I said, "Is it pretty safe?" And they said, "Yeah, it's pretty safe." And then they said, "Well, no guarantees," but then again they said, "But it's pretty safe." So something to that. I don't remember the exact words, and I don't know if they're supposed to say that. That sounds like something that maybe either the coordinator or the PI should say, and I don't know. But
yeah, that's one of those gray areas, because if you're asking about the study drug, okay.
Yeah.
But if you're asking about the study in general, most studies are all studies are pretty safe. Safety's first, but the study drug, you don't know. You really don't know unless it's open label, and even then, you don't really know. Like if it's
it might have been. I don't recall.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, it wasn't. It wasn't open label, that particular one.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you your experience is your B2C, business to customer, business to consumer experience from hospitality. You're applying it here. The unique thing about research, and I don't know if there's too many industries like this, but from a research site, because you're trying to build a site network. So
Sure.
we'll look at it in the context of a research site owner. Okay, you actually have three stakeholders that are your customers. Okay, you have patients, which you know all about because you're B2C. Now, but the rest, the other two are B2B. It's physicians and then it's sponsors, sponsors
Definitely.
slash CROs. So
Sure.
really, and here's the thing, like the last two are the ones that pay you, not the patients, right? The patient almost become like, it's sad to say, like a commodity if you're a
Sure.
site because you're just like another number. Right
Sure.
now, most sites treat their patients really well when they go to the site. So I'm
Uh,
not saying that this is how they treat their patients, but from a business perspective, that's what the industry actually is. You know,
Sure.
it's pharma pays us, the doctors we have to work with them, and then the patients hopefully they come from the doctor. So your other background is actually interesting too from a tech space, because from the tech space, you have and you're seeing a lot of potential disruptions in the industry now with eSource. We talked earlier about it. One, eSource integrates with EDC. Risk-based monitoring was a big thing 4 years ago. Now you hear less about it. So technology and how that actually can make the B2B side more efficient,
Sure.
at least from the site to the sponsor side. So there are just all those areas, those three different stakeholders. I haven't been in other industries, but I can't think of one that has three stakeholders that are equally important.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty unique to healthcare in general. You'll see that with probably other aspects of healthcare, where there's one person's paying the bill, another person is actually receiving the service, and a third party is actually providing the service. Maybe insurance, just like any other, like homeowners insurance, where if you have a claim, they will pay, the insurance company is paying the provider, but the actual customer is a homeowner. Maybe something similar.
Something
But
like
that,
that, yeah. Or like financing, like mortgage, right?
yeah, but healthcare, you have the government portion, which is the FDA and the IRBs, which adds a whole other element to it. So it is unique. You're right about that.
So let's talk about now. We've identified all these pain points. You've identified the ones from the B2C.
If I can finish,
Yeah.
so the so interestingly, we talked about patient experience. So actually, the next day I went in to the study,
Ah.
and one of the questions I asked them, the recruiter, is how long will the initial one take? And they said about maybe 2 to 3 hours.
So you took this far. I thought you just did the phone calls. You actually went in.
Yeah. And actually, this is I didn't want to do something unethical. So this is actually a study that I qualified for,
Wow,
and
okay.
what genuinely actually gone through it.
Okay.
Gone through it. So I went into the clinic the next day, and it was a clinic with a practice attached to it. And so I went in, I signed in. They gave me a bunch of paperwork to sign, and I gave them my ID, and I handed in the forms, but they didn't give me back my ID, and it slipped my mind. So the coordinator brought me in and sat me down, and she said that it would take about 5 hours. And I was like, really, 5 hours? I was told by the recruiter on the phone it would be 2 hours. And she said, yeah, well, this is the initial visit, so it's a little bit more. And plus each additional visit will be about 3 to 4 hours. And I was like, whoa, that's that's a big commitment. And because the recruiter told me about 3 hours for the initial and 2 hours for the follow-up. And I mentioned that to the coordinator, and she said, well, yeah, it's going to take longer because sometimes the doctor will have other patients, and she also has another practice. She has her main practice where she sees patients, and so that might be the case. And so I said, oh, okay, that's okay. For the sake of science, let's let's just go through with it and do it. But there were some other IE criteria that I wasn't able to meet, which the recruiter did not mention. They had screened me for one of the harder criteria, which I met, but they did not screen for one of the other criteria, which was very, very specific, and I couldn't meet that criteria. So I was screened out, and they said, yeah, and I asked a lot of questions about, well, what if I, so I know one of the things that you talk about is a patient can leave a trial for any reason or no reason. And that's a very important part of the ethics and conveying that to the patient. And the coordinator kind of danced around it. She wouldn't say that directly. I said, well, what if I want to, what if I feel that it's not for me? She said, well, we really don't want you to leave. And so if you think you're going to leave, we really don't want you to start unless you can commit to it. And I asked a couple different ways. Can you really, can I leave at any time? I don't remember what the words exactly were, but what do I have to complete the whole trial? I think, and she essentially was attempting to lead me to believe that yes, I had to complete it, with the caveat saying, yeah, you could leave, but so there was a little bit of, I don't want to call it coercion, but yeah. It was not a clear cut. Yes, you can leave for any time, for any reason, and it's totally up to you. So that was that, and so because of the exclusion criteria, I had to leave, and I'm not sure they got paid for that visit. They might have gotten paid for the screen failure. I don't know what if it
usually there's like a ratio of screen failures per randomizations that the sponsor will compensate for.
So then I was I left, and
did you see a doctor while you were there?
I didn't. No, I didn't get to the doctor because it was I was screened out essentially.
Oh, okay.
So then later on, I realized that I left my ID there. They never gave it back to me. And so I called them, and, you guys have my ID by chance? I think I left it there, and they're like, no, we don't have it, and you would have gotten it back. And so then I called back, maybe a couple hours later. I said, did you guys find it yet? And they said, no. I said, can you do me a favor? Can you look in the waiting area? Maybe it got left there. Can you ask the coordinator? Maybe somehow they have it or something, and they said, yeah, we'll check, and they put me on hold, and they checked, and they couldn't find it, and so that was my driver's license, and I already left the clinic, and I was maybe 10-15 miles away. This was kind of out of my way, and so I was driving without a license, and so I had to figure out how to get a replacement license because
Wow.
So long story short, the next day I made an appointment. I went to the DMV, spent my morning doing that, getting it replaced. Luckily, I got an appointment to do that. But that's potentially a half or a full day gone, and it's just when I say not patient centric, I think that was an understatement.
Yeah, right.
So then I called a fifth clinic, and it was a different trial, but for the same indication, and they were able to screen me on the phone again, and they found a day that worked for me, so that was all good. But so a couple things happened with that one. So then the recruiter calls me back at least 3 times to change the time. So he said, oh, we had something with our software, and the time that you said that you wanted and that we said was available is no longer available. So can you do X time instead? I said, okay, fine, I'll do X time or X day. And then he calls me back at least 2 more times. One time saying that, oh, what about this day? And I said, no, let's stick to the original. And then he called me back again saying that, oh, okay, we fixed the error, and it turns out it was not an issue with your original time. So if you want the original time, we'll give it to you. I said, no, that's fine. So that was just, I was working and I was in the middle of my thing, and phone rings 2-3 times. So I had to deal with that. And this was a site with multiple locations. It was not a single, it was not a mom and pop type site, corporate site. So I go to the location. Again, not necessarily in my way. It was kind of out of my way, and I made it to the clinic. I signed in, and I sat with the coordinator, and she went through some of the screening questions again, and the recruiter, and again, same thing. The recruiter told me 3 hours or 2 or 3 hours, and it was actually 5 hours. And I said, well, I budgeted for 2 or 3 hours. Can you get me out in 3 hours maybe? And she said, okay, we'll try to do that. But again, one of the exclusion criteria, which recruiter, he glossed over it, but did not go deep into it. And so, like he said that you have to be able to do X. Whereas the criteria was you have to do X, but you can't do Y, or you have to do X, Y, Z in combination. So in short, it was more detailed.
And those are basically 2 examples of when a recruiter kind of oversold, And really, they're doing that. They're incentivized to do that because they get measured. One of the metrics is how many people are they bringing in, whether they qualify or not. I mean, they do look at qualification, but they're really looking at volume. How many do you bring in? So to the recruiter, it's, hey, I want Ronak here. So let's just get him in. And then that's a number, that's my metric or one of my metrics. And then it's up to the coordinator to see if they qualify. So that's another flaw in the system that you've discovered in this aspect.
Yeah. So interestingly, so I spent maybe an hour there, and the coordinator was really good. She actually, I asked her, is there can we make an exception? Can we, instead of doing X, can we do Y? And she said, I don't think so, but let me check. Let me get up. And she got up and she went, asked somebody, probably, I don't know, it was the study director or site director, maybe. I don't know who she went to, but it turned out that that she could not make an exception, and so I was screened out of that one. And so interestingly, the checkout process, they have a form that they give you, and you're supposed to give it to the checkout person. And I saw on the form there was a checkbox for whether you're supposed to pay the patient or not, whether the patient gets payment for the visit or not. Mm-hmm. And she didn't check either box. So the coordinator gave the clipboard to the checkout person and started walking away. And before she walked away, the checkout person asked, "What are we doing?" Which I thought, I think that usually it's, are we scheduling another visit? Et cetera, et cetera. But I think it was also a veiled question to ask the coordinator because the checkbox was not checked, like, pay him or not pay him. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea that I got. And she said, I think she just shrugged. And then I asked, oh, by the way, is there payment for this visit? And she said, oh, yeah, we can, she took out a prepaid card and handed it to me. She said, yeah, we'll pay you for the visit, but it's only $10 because, you didn't finish the visit. So I said, fine, I'll take it, which made me think about the other visit where not only did they not pay me, but they lost my driver's license, so it cost me money. I was like, I should have asked for something for my time because that was a problem. But, from my perspective, that even if you're getting full payment, which is, I think it was like between $60 and $70, something like that. Let's say $70. If you count the time, the travel, the gas, you're really compensating a patient only barely minimum wage. And so if somebody's is actually taking time out of their day, these things are things that discourage patients from wanting to participate unless they're really, really motivated by the science, or they've exhausted all the options for
Right.
treatment. I took the $10 and bought me a lunch with it as a concession.
So so basically, like, we use Uber. Most of our sites use Uber to get patients. So, the indications are usually people like we do a lot of psych. So not
Sure.
most of our patients don't actually have transportation. So we provide Uber, but we've actually started doing that for all the other indications as well. We always offer it. Hey, we can pick you up in an Uber if you want. Some people want to drive themselves. That's fine. But so when you did this, you already had in mind that you wanted to build this site network. So let's talk
Sure.
about some of the other inefficiencies in the industry, because there are many. Okay.
Absolutely.
And then what is your goal? Like, what are you trying to do? Because you're obviously a successful entrepreneur in other industries. So what are you trying to bring to clinical research besides just better customer service for the patients, which is obviously everyone should be doing, but what are you doing in addition to that? Because there's two other layers here, as we discussed. So what is your goal here?
I mean, ultimately, I want to build a network and be able to complete trials 30 to 50% faster. And that encompasses all areas from study startup, which I think Tufts said on average it takes 8 months. There are sites out there today that are able to do it in 30 days or less. So, if you can start a study faster, you can, that's going to save some time. You start faster, you can complete faster. Things around, like you mentioned, patient recruitment, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. With the example that I had with calling the various sites, I was calling after 5 p.m. And if you look at most real people, they are working until, they're working maybe 9 to 5, and so unless they're calling during their lunch hour, which, funny enough, one or two of the sites I remember, our hours of operation are 9 to 5, and we close from 12 to 1 for lunch. So it's like, all the hours that would actually make sense for somebody to try to call, they're closed.
That's right. That's right.
So anyway, getting back to the point, I think with the putting in a call center. So I think that starts with realizing what the value of a lead is. In marketing, everything is assigned a number, a numerical value. So something like clinical trials, where the per patient, let's say, we can work with numbers that you give me. What is an average per patient visit, let's say?
Usually $1,200 per visit if we negotiate, if DSCS negotiates, or somebody comparable negotiates it for you.
Okay, so let's say $1,200. And how many patient visits per study on average?
About 10.
About 10. Okay, so that gives you $12,000 in revenue. And what is the gross margin when you take out direct costs for the per patient?
Should be around 65 or up.
Okay, so let's go 0.65. Okay, so the value of a randomized patient that completes a study is $7,800.
Right.
It's your contribution margin, they call it. So $7,800. Now, I heard that the drop-off rate is about 30%.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it could be in some studies higher, much higher. Like, I've seen some studies with 90% dropout rates. But yeah, on average, let's say between 35 and 50.
Okay, so let's say 35%. So I'm going to take out 35% of that. So that gives me $5,070 per patient. Now, how many screens do you need to get a randomization on average?
2 to 4. Let's say
That's it?
3. Let's say 3.
Really?
Yeah, 3 screenings to get a randomization. That's about right.
Okay. So divide that by 3.
Actual screenings that come in the office, not phone screenings that a recruiter's
Okay.
doing.
So then how many? Okay. So let's. So then we take that and we divide by 3. So that gives you a value of 1690. And then how many phone screens drop off, or how many phone screens come into an in-person screen?
Like 7 or 8.
Out of
7 or 8 calls for every one body that comes in the office.
Okay. So I'm going to take that and divide it by 8.
Okay.
So that gives you a value of $211 per lead. Do you follow me?
When you break it down this way, I think you're helping Guru Nation a lot right now.
So really, anything, let's say you get a call center that will give you, that will charge you, $50 per lead. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it would be that much.
No.
But let's say for argument's sake, I would do that all day long because that's an ROI of 4 times.
Right.
It means for every $1 you put in for your lead, assuming it's the same quality and they're not, everything is equal and they're doing everything as you want them to do, then that means for every $1 that you put in, it's a little vending machine that comes out with $4. Mm-hmm. So if you had a machine where you put in a quarter and you got $1 out every time, how many times would you do that?
Yeah, that'd be an excellent machine. We'd install one in every clinic.
So that and that kind of, when you put a value to a lead, that does a couple of things. One, it gives you a budget. So now you know that you can spend $50 a patient or even $100 a patient, because if it's incremental and if it's a patient that you would not have gotten otherwise, then it's all incremental. And so your overall margins might go down because of these extra costs, but your profit will go up over time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, and there are companies out there that will do, pay per lead recruiting for the trial. So, call centers, after hours, maybe even weekend call centers. How powerful would it be to say, hey, call us 24/7 or call us on the weekends?
Right. Usually the bigger sites do that, but yeah, most sites, like you said earlier, are probably 80% mom and pop, or like a few investigators, like 3 investigators max. Yeah. That's a site. That's an average site in the United States.
Sure. And so, there are so many opportunities where a patient, you don't know what's happening in a patient's life. So in my example, I could have, let's say I call and I leave a message and then I totally forget about it. 10 things could come up in my life that I just, I don't call them back, or I don't follow up. And really, it shouldn't be on me to follow up. It should be on the clinic to call me to follow up and try to get me in.
Of course.
So it's really kind of a leaky bucket, if you will. You're paying for the infrastructure to get the patient in, but you're letting so many patients go. So just doing some of these things, like putting in a call center, and you don't have to do this in house. There are companies that'll do it. Maybe text messages. I don't know if the IRBs would like this or would allow it, but
yeah, they wouldn't care. Text are okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've used that in my previous business and for things like customer service and
like a CRM tool, right? Like a customer service, customer retention.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as a Google Voice number that you set up for free that forwards to a recruiter's cell phone.
Right. That's what our sites do, actually. We give them Google Voice for the coordinators in charge of recruiting. Google Voice, they're incentivized to answer even after hours when they're not working, and they get bonus based on activity of the site, overall activity, right? They get paid just like the doctors would get paid. Which brings us actually to the next thing, so the doctors, right? So, and then we're going to put out a call to action because you're building a site network, you're looking to build a board. But explain to Guru Nation as much as you want. I know more. I don't want to speak without your permission. So you explain as much as you want about your vision for what you want to create.
So really my vision is to create nationwide and eventually international network of sites that can start and complete trials faster, that can do it basically with higher efficiency, higher quality through things like eSource and eReg and all the IT that's available, that's been available out there in the market, and really build something from the ground up, if you will. Partnering with some of the best sites that are out there, and we want to acquire sites that maybe that have good operations, good employees, but maybe they are not able to take it to the next level. And our ideal target is sites that are that are dedicated sites, not necessarily affiliated with the practice, at least more than one PI, and that are really wanting to take it to the next level. We're in the process of building an amazing board of directors with people in the industry. I've been talking to some of the top people that you would recognize, and so if if that is something of interest to anybody, whether it's a board position or as an employee. Or even if you're looking to sell your site, let's have a conversation. I'm definitely interested in that.
Links will be underneath. Do you want me to link to your email, LinkedIn? What should I do?
Put up my email. Put up my LinkedIn. Sure.
Okay. We'll have the links in the show notes. For those listening, what is your email?
It's rganatra@gmail.com.
Okay, very good. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to follow up with you on how things go, how things progress. Taking care of the customer service aspect is one thing, but then there's also getting the studies, taking care of the sponsors, kind of the chicken and the egg, right? Like,
sure,
you kind of need a study, but even before that, you need a PI, but you're going about it just acquiring a site. So, very interesting. If you're looking to sell or join or be part of the network, reach out to Ronek. He's a seasoned entrepreneur with, as you heard, tons of knowledge. I mean, the way you broke it down into like the revenue per lead. Okay, this is a numbers game, guys. Like, yeah, not every patient you talk to is gonna be worth $200, but if given enough time and enough volume, that's what the math boils down to. Right?
Yeah, and on average, that's what it comes down to. And now, I'll leave you with this thought. Think of a patient that actually, is screened and randomized, and that patient is actually worth, the full $12,000 in top line to you. Imagine that you're going into a Ritz-Carlton, and think of the way that you're welcomed. Think of how you feel. Think of how you're treated. It's like every single thing that you can think of is taken care of from the moment you walk in. You feel like you're in heaven on earth.
You're a hotel guy. You pay attention to this stuff.
Absolutely, and think all the little things are taken care of. From when you walk in, they bring you a welcome drink. They check you in, and you really feel like a celebrity. And if you actually look at it, let's say if you're staying a night, maybe a night at the Ritz-Carlton is, I don't know, $400, $500.
Right.
Think about how they make you feel for that $400. Now, in contrast, one patient that is randomized is worth, $12,000 in revenue on top line. Are you giving that patient a $12,000 experience? Are you treating him as if he is worth $12,000? Similar thing with, you go to Disney World or you go on a cruise. Yeah. Think of how you feel and how they make you feel. But the numbers for research are like a huge multiple of that.
I bet the Ritz never lost your ID, right? You're
And I've never stayed at the Ritz, but I'm just imagining what kind of experience it would be. But it's the whole idea is to think about really educating the entire staff as if, hey, every patient that comes in here is literally worth gold.
And that is so true. But you're like, to keep with the hotel analogy, as as we wrap up, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. It's going longer than I thought, but this is great. We can do this forever. You're actually entering the industry at a very interesting time with
Uh-huh.
virtual trials,
Sure.
replacing risk-based monitoring. You may not have even heard of risk-based monitoring because you're just getting in now, but 2016, this was like all the rage.
Uh-huh.
Now, and that was all about systems and everything integrating. Now they realized, hey, we kind of still need the 100% SDV, source data verification. But now what the industry is pushing, and they argue, and I believe it, that they are trying to create a bigger pie by adding the type of studies the industry will offer. So you're going to have your traditional trials, which is what we've been discussing, and then your virtual trials, right?
Yeah, I think it's
Which,
going to be exciting.
yeah, which keeping with the hotel thing, I mean, that's like an Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a Ritz, right? So that's interesting, and there's a lot of vendors there, and I would say that for you, if you haven't looked down that path yet, I think you can do both at the same time. I think creating the
That's,
site network helps you create the virtual trial
yeah,
infrastructure
I
anyways.
actually had conversation with Mark Hanley, Virtrial.
Okay. Did
So
you have conversations?
yeah, yeah, and it's something that's definitely on the radar for what we want to do. The decentralized trials, the hybrid trials.
Do you see the similarities between like Airbnb and what they did the hotels and this for research, or is that overly
Uh,
ambitious?
I think so in terms of impact because really it's about patient recruitment and retention. And so there really is no contest between me being able to sit at home and complete a trial versus me getting in a car, driving, spending money, spending time. I would do that all day long, and you can convince a lot more patients to do a virtual trial versus a traditional trial for sure.
Right, yeah. It'll be interesting. We got to do follow-up emails again. If you're interested in joining the board, if you're interested in selling your site, if you're interested in working in any capacity with Ronick, or just interested in talking to him, okay?
Sure.
Reach out to him. Links will be in the show notes. I actually, as we were talking, you're Atlanta-based right now,
I'm
like you personally?
Tampa.
Tampa, okay, Tampa. I know someone. I can introduce you to two more people off camera that I thought of since our last conversation. But yeah, Ronak, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences. And we definitely have to do follow-ups now. Once you
Sure.
acquire your first site, we can
Absolutely.
talk about whatever we can get into, and then your what you're discovering about the industry. But that's most people don't just come in acquiring sites. So what you're doing is very ambitious, but it makes sense knowing your background as to what you're trying to do. And very good opportunity for board members. It's just us being in California, you being in Florida, me being so busy. I mean, we're starting to do 510Ks now. So there's
Uh-huh.
just so much. There's not enough of me to go around even for what we have. But the board, I mean, if I were like 5 years ago, this would have been a fantastic opportunity for me. You guys should jump at this opportunity. Reach out to Ronik. And thank you very much for coming on. And we're going to definitely do it again.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.